Everyone remembers where Sansa Stark ended up in Season 5, the road north, the gates of Winterfell, a Bolton standing at the end of it. What has more or less disappeared from the way people talk about that season is a roadside inn several weeks earlier, and a woman crossing a common room to offer her a way out. Brienne of Tarth found her, not near her, not a day behind her on the road, in the same room, at a table close enough that she could say the name without raising her voice. Sansa said no. That refusal is where the story stops for most people, and it is where I stopped too. For a long time I filed the whole sequence as a tragic near miss. A rescuer arrived, a frightened girl turned her away, and everything that happened at Winterfell grew out of that one bad call. I was wrong about where the decision actually sat, and the thing that changed my mind was not the conversation at the table. It was what Petyr Baelish did in the 10 minutes after he had already won it. The refusal was real. Sansa spoke it herself. She attached her own reason to it, and nobody put the words in her mouth. But she spoke them inside a room Baelish controlled, and everything he did once she had said them tells you he did not believe the answer would hold. There are two things here worth getting to. The reason she gave, which is smaller and sadder than almost anyone remembers, and the move Baelish made next, which makes no sense at all if he had genuinely won. Start with the room, because the shape of it does most of the work. Brienne and Podrick stop at an inn to eat. Podrick notices the pair at another table and points them out quietly. Baelish is traveling with Sansa and an armed Vale escort, and Brienne's first move is not to walk over to them. She tells Podrick to go and get the horses ready. Before she has spoken a single word to Sansa Stark, she has already built herself an exit. Read that as the professional judgment it is. She looked at the room, counted the men in it, and concluded that making this offer would probably require running afterwards. She made it anyway. Then she goes to the table and offers service. She is not asking a favor from a girl she pities. She is invoking a dead woman's claim on her own life, out loud, in front of a man she has no reason to trust. Baelish answers with two separate attacks, and the speed of the switch between them is the part worth watching. The first is about character. He points out that Brienne swore to protect Renly Baratheon, and Renly died. He points out that she swore to protect Catelyn Stark, and Catelyn died. Then he asks, reasonably enough to anyone listening, why he would want somebody with that history of failure guarding Sansa. The second attack arrives almost immediately, and it is doing something entirely different. He states that he is Sansa's uncle by his marriage to Lysa Arryn. They are family now. Brienne is an outsider, and experience has made him wary of outsiders. Inside about 90 seconds, he has moved from she is incompetent to she has no standing here. Those two arguments do different jobs. The first one loses if Sansa happens to like Brienne. The second one holds even if she does. Somebody improvising would have found whichever line was landing and pushed harder on it. Baelish laid a second floor underneath the first one, in case the first one gave way. There is a limit to what I can establish here, and it should be said before we go any further. I do not know what Sansa wanted in that moment. Her words are on record, her intention is not. Anyone telling you with confidence that she was secretly desperate to accept is filling in a gap the show left open on purpose, and the gap stays open. The honest position is that the evidence stops there, and stopping is harder than continuing. I wrote a book that stops in a lot of places, The Quiet Game, including a list of the claims I had to withdraw, link in the description. What she actually said is a matter of record though, and it is the part almost nobody repeats. Brienne asked whether they might speak alone. Sansa refused that too, and she refused it fast. Baelish did not have to block it for her. She closed that door herself, before Brienne could get another sentence out, and I am not going to pretend that helps my argument. Whatever pressure was in that room, her mouth was her own. Then she gave her reason. She had seen Brienne at Joffrey's wedding, bowing to the king. That is not the reasoning of a naive girl, and it is worth slowing down on. Sansa watched her father die on a king's order. She then spent years inside a court where the people who bowed to that boy were, in practice, owned by him. Sir Meryn Trant bowed, and then beat her in front of the whole court when Joffrey told him to. She had watched that logic operate on her own body. Out of all of it, she built a rule, and the rule was that a bent knee in that throne room told you exactly who a person belonged to. The rule was correct almost every time she ever used it. It failed once. It failed on the only person in Westeros who had bowed to Joffrey while already carrying a commission to save her. There is something else in that room the scene never states, and it changes how the whole refusal should be read. Sansa did not know where she was being taken. At that same table, minutes before Brienne walked over, Sansa asked Baelish about the message he had received before they left the Vale. He told her his marriage proposal had been accepted. That was the entire answer. Not whose marriage, not to which house. He was closing a deal about her future across a plate of food in front of her face, in language she had no way of decoding, and that is the condition she was sitting in when a stranger offered to take her home. The name comes later, on the road north, and her reaction is the whole proof of what she did not know at the inn. She recognizes Moat Cailin before Baelish explains anything, and she works out for herself where she is being taken. Then she says it out loud, to the man who arranged it. Roose Bolton murdered her brother. Roose Bolton betrayed her family. There is nothing performed in any of it. And she still has not been told the worst part of it, because she assumes the marriage is to Roose. Baelish corrects her on that. It is the son. So the choice at that table was never Brienne against Ramsay Bolton. Sansa was not weighing a rescuer against a monster and picking the monster. She was weighing a stranger who had bowed to Joffrey against a man she had been told, repeatedly and by people she had no better option than to trust, was taking her somewhere safe. Given what was actually in front of her, the answer she gave was not even unreasonable. The tragedy in that scene is a correct decision, made with information that had been curated by the man selling her. He had won. Sansa had refused the service, refused the private word, and given a reason that put the matter past arguing. Brienne had nothing left to say to her. Instead of letting her go, Baelish invited her to stay. He suggested Brienne remain at the inn overnight, on the grounds that the road was not safe. Brienne read that offer for exactly what it was. She walked out, took horses that were not hers, and left with Podrick at speed. Baelish's men rode after them. They caught Brienne and Podrick out in open country and tried to kill them both. Podrick was thrown from his horse and came very close to dying on the ground before Brienne cut down the man standing over him. She killed several of them. That is the only reason there is a Brienne of Tarth left in this story at all. This is the receipt the argument rests on, and it needs handling precisely, because it proves less than it first appears to, and more than anyone gives it credit for. It does not prove that Baelish manipulated Sansa's mind, and it does not prove he predicted the answer she would give. What it proves is that Petyr Baelish did not consider the refusal reliable. A man who believes he has genuinely won does not spend men and risk on a threat that has already been dealt with. He treated Brienne as an unresolved problem immediately after she had apparently been resolved. He was never counting on Sansa's judgment to keep her away, and he wanted the person who made that offer permanently unable to make it a second time. The strongest case against all of this deserves a proper hearing, because it is a real case and it nearly took the argument apart. The rival reading is that Sansa refused on her own judgment, that Baelish was largely incidental to it, and that treating him as the engineer of the moment is projecting a plan onto a man who happened to be sitting at the same table. Two things support that. The first is that his criticism of Brienne was true. Renly Baratheon did die under her protection. Catelyn Stark did die under her protection. He was not fabricating a smear. He picked up a fact that was already lying on the ground, and Sansa was entitled to weigh it. The second is heavier, and it is the reason this claim is narrower than the one I originally wrote. Arya Stark had already refused Brienne. Months earlier, on a hillside, with no Petyr Baelish anywhere in the vicinity, Brienne made the same offer to the other Stark girl and was turned down flat. Podrick raises it in this very episode. He points out that both Stark girls have now refused her service, and suggests the vow might reasonably be considered discharged. Two sisters, separately, under completely different conditions, gave the same answer. That badly damages any claim that Baelish produced the refusal, so I am not going to make that claim. What survives is narrower and worse for him. He did not manufacture her answer. He supplied the argument for it. He asserted a family claim over her that Brienne had no standing to counter. He controlled every piece of information she held about her own destination. And then, holding the answer he wanted, he sent riders to kill the woman who had asked the question. The Arya parallel does not weaken any of that. It explains something else, which is why Brienne's task was close to impossible from the beginning. Nobody who had watched their own family destroyed was going to hand themselves over to a stranger with an oath and a poor record. Brienne's problem was structural. Baelish only had to lean on a door that was already shut. The Arya comparison misses one thing, though, and it is what was physically sitting on that table. Brienne had been armed, armored, and commissioned by Jaime Lannister. On an oath, Jaime swore to Catelyn Stark in a Riverlands camp while he was her prisoner. The sword on Brienne's hip had been forged out of Eddard Stark's own greatsword, melted down in King's Landing, and reworked into two blades. In equipment, in standing, in sheer improbability, it was the best-funded rescue anyone was ever going to send for Sansa Stark. It was declined over a bough at a wedding, and then hunted through the trees by armed riders. What Brienne did next is the part of Season 5 that gets summarized out of existence. The standard account is that she kept missing Sansa, and that account is wrong in a way that matters because it turns a defeat into an absence. She did not miss her, she found her, made the offer in person, was refused, and was then run off by armed men sent specifically to end her. She did not go home. She had been formally rejected by both of the girls she was sworn to. Her squire had nearly been killed underneath her. Her own companion had told her to her face that the vow could be considered finished, and nobody in Westeros would have argued with him. She followed anyway. When Sansa was taken inside Winterfell, Brienne took a room at an inn within sight of the walls and settled in to watch them. She got a message through, carried in from the inn by an old servant woman who told Sansa that the North remembered her. One light in the highest window of the broken tower, and Brienne would come. That was the whole arrangement. Sansa could not reach the tower herself. She asked Theon to carry the candle up for her, and Theon carried it up the stairs and took it to Ramsay instead. The old woman who delivered the message was flayed for her part in it, and Ramsay made Sansa look at the body. So the seasons pass with Brienne sitting in a rented room, staring at a piece of stone where a light was supposed to appear and did not. And when the light finally came, Brienne was not there to see it. Sansa lit that candle herself, at the very end, after everything Ramsay had already done. By then, Brienne had left her post and gone to find Stannis Baratheon to settle an older oath for a dead king. The signal burned in an empty window. That is the part of this I find hardest to argue around, because it means the rescue failed twice, and the second failure belonged to Brienne alone. She came back regardless. She found Sansa in the snow without any signal at all, because she had never actually stopped looking for her. So the confident part comes down to this. The rescue reached Sansa Stark before Ramsay Bolton did, in a room Petyr Baelish controlled, and the moment it was refused, he sent men to kill the woman who had offered it. What cannot be stated, and I would rather say it than let it slide past, is that Sansa wanted to accept, or that leaving with Brienne would have saved her from anything. Brienne and Podrick were two people with an armed Vale escort behind them on an open road. That escape might have failed inside the hour. The show does not tell us, and I am not going to build an ending for it out of nothing. There is one last thing, which the show stages without comment and never once draws attention to. When Brienne finally reached her, in the snow, with Bolton men dead in the trees around them, she knelt and made the identical offer. The same formal words, the same oath, sworn to the same dead woman. She laid her sword down in the snow in front of Sansa and said it again. And Sansa, who had refused those exact words at a warm table with an armed escort at her back, could barely get through her half of them. She stumbled over the response. Podrick had to feed her the next line. Nothing about Brienne had changed in the months between the inn and the snow. Not her record, not her failures, not the wedding she attended, not the knee she bent to Joffrey. All of it was still true, and all of it was still on the table. The only thing that had changed was that Sansa now knew what Petyr Baelish had been walking her towards, and by the time she knew it, the knowledge had already cost her everything it was going to cost. The rescue was never late. The information was.